Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to CFH Fantasy Hockey Discussions. I am CFH, and you're tuned in to Hockey Discussions Live. We have some updates to share with you in regards to the four-man league today. We had an important league call yesterday, and I'm here to report the findings from that conversation. Hope everybody had a good Tuesday. As we look ahead, heading into this Sunday, we have the fantasy draft for the 2025-2026 season. Yesterday, we had a very important GM meeting with each of the teams associated with the league. Once again, to recap, if you did not tune into our first episode, we are in a four-man's keepers league, just wrapped up our first season last year. You're going to hear a couple names today that are going to shock a lot of you in the fantasy hockey world because of how much star power is on each team, but it is completely normal in our league as we have a very shallow pool of teams and a very deep pool of players. So each team is allocated a certain amount of star power based off our initial draft last year. So just to recap our points, it is goals 3 points, assists 2, penalty minutes 0.1, power play goals 2, power play assists 1, shorthanded goals 2, shorthanded assists 1, game-winning goals 0.5, hat tricks 2, shots on goal 0.5, hits 0.5, block shots 0.5, goalie wins 4, goals against -1, saves 0.1, shutouts 3, and overtime losses 1. So a bit of a points league, a bit of a bangers league with the hits and block shots combo, but penalty minutes we toned down a bit just to ensure that they're not too high. I think we went through a discussion this offseason around putting that up to 0.5 down to 0.1, but nonetheless, here we are. Episode 1, I gave you a bit of a rundown of my keepers as well as what the league looks like from a team standpoint. I also discussed my guesses on the keepers for the 3 other teams in the league. Well, as of last night at around 8 p.m., we solidified those keepers. They are now locked into our ESPN app, and we now await draft on Sunday. So, as I mentioned, we're going to go through and sift each team, discuss their keepers, discuss their strategies, any initial thoughts I have around each team, and then we will wrap up the episode. I most likely will have one more episode put together in regards to my final fantasy rankings, what my thoughts are on each available player for us, who I think will take who. I'll record that prior to the draft, and I'll release it after, obviously for confidentiality reasons, and see how I did in regards to the actual outcomes. But nonetheless, let's get into things here. The first team I'll start with, I'll recap my team, I guess, to start, but if you want to hear my thought process behind who I kept and why, go back to that first episode. Once again, Team CFH, Nathan McKinnon, Leon Draisaitl, David Pasternak, Rasmus Dahlin, and Kirill Kaprizov were my keepers heading into the 2025-2026 season. We'll then discuss Team Colt. So Team Colt is an interesting one as they were going in with a selection of potential keepers. We'll take a look at who exactly we had here. So I know Team Colt was going through some internal discussions on who to keep and why. And you look at his team, he had access to a number of guys. So his keepers I'll start off with, and then we'll go into his access. He had Connor McDavid as a keeper, Jack Eichel, Zach Werenski, Quinn Hughes, and Sam Reinhart as his main keepers heading into 2025-2026. So looking at his keepers, obviously you have the no-brainers. You're going to be keeping Connor McDavid 10 out of 10 times. You're going to most likely be keeping Quinn Hughes, and you're most likely going to keep well, I guess those are the 2 no-brainers. I think the 3 other keepers he has, maybe other people wouldn't agree. Looking at his player pool, other potential keepers of his could have been Mark Scheifele. They could have been Macklin Celebrini. Tom Wilson sticks out to me. Adrian Kempe. So he had a selection of players, but he took Eichel, Werenski, and Sam Reinhart. So outside of the 2 obvious ones of McDavid and Quinn Hughes, let's start with Zach Werenski. Extremely promising and surprising fantasy player last season. If you played, he was drafted, I believe, in our team in the second to last round by Team Gary. So they went through and found Werenski. No one else was thinking anything of him. And Werenski last season pops up and puts up 450 points in our fantasy league, which was within, I want to say, the top 10 or 15 players in the league. At 23 goals, 59 assists. He was an absolute shot machine last year, too. I think he averaged anywhere from 3 to 5 shots a game, which was incredible to watch. So really neat stuff from Zach Werenski. That's a keeper for Colt. Now, the question is, does he replicate the season he had last year again? If you look at Zach Werenski in his past seasons, I know this was a year last year where he really made this step. You look at his previous years, he's been on Columbus since, this is going to shock a lot of people, 2016, where he was mostly a mid to high 40-point guy. In this past season, he just made a massive jump, going up to 82 points, which is sensational. And if he can keep that up, granted, it was only his second almost full-played season at 81 games. He previously had 82 games in 2018, where he put up 44 points. But this past season, he just did a lot of things right, and it paid off for him. He had 25 power play points, which was a career high for him. And he had, like I said, the 23 goals, 59 assists. Is it replicable? I think so. I think Columbus is going to be a good team again next year, competitive with the likes of Adam Fantilli, Sean Monahan. I think will still be a force there. They'll see what happens with Voronkov. But Zach Werenski, I think, is a solid pick. I'm excited to see him next season. I think he will put up similar numbers. If not, maybe I'll project him a little bit lower at mid to 70s maybe, but I don't foresee him going back to his old ways of 50 points. I don't really see that happening. So looking ahead at the other keepers, we'll go on to Jack Eichel, which we're all Sabres fans, if we like it or not, in the group. So it's always funny to see his name float around. Jack Eichel last season, 77 games played, 94 points, 28 goals, 66 assists, and close to 34 power play points. So an incredible, versatile player. He does a lot of the peripherals well. He shoots. He gets great power play deployment, and he also gets the goals and assists that you expect from a player of his caliber. Now, Eichel's an interesting one with only 77 games played last year. He still was close to 100 points, so that's somebody that I put my chips on the table for as well. I think he's going to perform, and he has a massive ceiling to hit. I think Eichel can be a low to mid 100-point player. Maybe that 105 to 110 range if he gets a full season. He only missed 5 games last year, so I guess low hundreds. If I had to say 102, maybe would be a career high for him. Eichel's yet to hit 100 points. But outside of that, Jack Eichel, pretty no-brainer in that selection. I'd pick him over everyone else I mentioned. And then we get into the last one we have for him, and that's Samson Reinhart. So Sam Reinhart is a pretty good selection. He's on a great team. Obviously, we know what Reinhart is capable of. He had that fantastic season not too long ago in 23-24 where he put up 94 points with 57 goals, which is incredible, and 37 assists. Obviously, the 50-goal mark, I think, is a ceiling for most of the league, let alone Sam Reinhart. I think he's more in the mid to high 30s range, and I like him in that 85-point range for Reinhart over a season, just over a point-a-game player. Once again, he gets great power play deployment. I think he was close to 30 power play points last season. He had 34 the year prior. He's always around the 30 mark for power play points. So in this league, that will do very well. And he shoots the puck a bunch. So Sam Reinhart, great selection for Team Colt. And that is it with who he is going into the season with. So he has a defenseman, some forwards. He has great deployment heading into the draft. And he has good coverage across the board. Let's get into Team Brown. So Team Brown is a team that I mentioned on the first call I was involved in with a trade prior to the draft. I traded Mitch Marner to Team Brown for one of his draft selections in the early rounds, and Mitch Marner ended up being a keeper of Team Brown. Now, I discussed with him a bit about that, and I think on both sides were comfortable with how that trade happened. He had some hesitancy with one of his keepers, which was Matthew Tkachuk, after the news from Elliot Friedman broke about his injury, And then taking a step back from everybody, we still don't know what's going on, but we both agree Kachuk's a player that you just have to select as a keeper. He hits, he makes plays, he blocks shots, he scores goals, he has assists. He's just an absolute presence on the ice at all times. So it made full sense to keep Matthew Kachuk as a keeper. That is followed with Brady Kachuk, Cal McCarr, Braden Point, and lastly, Mitch Marner. So looking at Team Brown, once again, great coverage. You have a defenseman, you have offenseman. Team Brown, as you can see, is taking a bit more of that banger style approach / category set approach with the Kachucks. Brady Kachuk obviously is an elite force in fantasy hockey. He's constantly a leader when it comes to hits, when it comes to block shots, when it comes to getting just those peripherals that will win you the week in the event that he doesn't score or get an assist. He's still going to be putting up PIMs and hits and blocks. Last year, Brady Kachuk had 55 points in 72 games, which may seem a bit low in regards to the other keepers you may hear today in regards to point production, but where Kachuk doesn't score or get assists per se, like I mentioned, he's making up with the peripherals with the shots, hits, penalty minutes, block shots, etc. Kachuk, 72 games played last season. Like I said, he had the lower mid 50 point total, but in fantasy points, he put up close to 470 points for our league, which is up there in the top 5% of players, 123 penalty minutes, and close to 300 shots on goal. So Kachuk, all around, easy keeper selection for Team Brown. We go into his other selections, moving into Cal McCarr, no-brainer. Matthew Kachuk, we discussed already. Mitch Marner, this is the one I said I had a bit hesitancy on when I was looking at the selection because he's going to a new team, but I think the payoff is worth a keeper. Marner is a power play merchant. I think he's absolutely going to be even more of a merchant on Vegas. He put up 102 points as his career high last season, 81 games played with Toronto. You now stick him on a Stanley Cup caliber team in Vegas, who I think is right up there with Edmonton in the Western Conference. So looking at that, I think Mitch Marner is going to have a pretty replicable season this year, if not even a bit higher. But like I said, sometimes players have a slower transitional period and take a bit more to be accustomed to their new team. Marner, 81 games played, 410 fantasy points last year. Rounding out his group, you have Braden Point, who Brown is known for being a Tampa fan. You know he's going to keep a Tampa guy. What better guy to take from Tampa than Braden Point himself? Point put up 389 points in 77 games played last year, so if you see him at a full season, he's easily getting over the 400-point hump. 42 goals, 40 assists, 82 points on the year. Point at 189 shots. The big thing that sticks out to me with Tampa, and Brown was the team last year who had a whole collection of Tampa guys on his roster, is they get so many power play points. Just looking at Point alone, if I keep saying Point, it'll get annoying, but Point had 31 power play tallies last year between goals and assists, which is a league leading. We discussed Reinhardt, Point's right up there with him. So that's something that I think will add up in this league, and to have a guy who's playing with Kucherov and getting the deployment with Gensel and Hedman, you're going to see a lot of good things happen. So that's Team Brown rounding out the rest of what he's bringing to the equation there. The last team we're going to discuss here is Team Gary. So Team Gary is consisting of his keepers of Austin Matthews, Nikita Kucherov, Kyle Connor, Connor Hellebuck, and Mikko Rantanen. So Team Gary is an interesting one as well. And I know I've said that about everybody, but I think everyone took into account different aspects. I think Team Gary had the deepest player pool to select from his keeper stakes, and that's mostly evolving behind a late trade that happened last year that Team Colt acquired Zach Werenski from Team Gary, and Team Colt had to pay up for Zach Werenski, as you can imagine. He traded over a lot of the valuable assets that you see at the top of our league to Team Gary to acquire Zach Werenski, but it ended up being a keeper for Team Colt, so you can guess if it paid off or not. But Team Gary selecting, I'll not talk about the obvious ones of Austin Matthews and Nikita Kucherov, but let's get into some of the more obscure ones. So I mentioned he had a deep player pool to select from, and Kyle Connor and Mikko Rantanen stick out to me as selections from him. So some of the other guys he could have selected from consist of Mackenzie Weegar, Josh Morrissey, Mikhail Sergachev, Sidney Crosby, Alexander Barkov, Igor Shesterkin, William Nylander, to the likes of those types of players. So a very stacked roster. Now, Gary selecting Kyle Connor, is that a crazy selection as a keeper? I don't think so. Kyle Connor was sitting at 82 games played last year, 451 points. Connor also put up 28 power play points. Winnipeg had the best power play last year in the NHL. You have a guy who's going to be getting a lot of finishes on that power play, and your team as a keeper, you're going to do all right. Kyle Connor at 97 points last year, a career high, beating his 21-22 season of 93 points. I think Connor continues to grow into this year. I wouldn't be surprised if he hits 100 points, sitting around 45 goals and maybe 60 assists from Connor I'd like to see. But I think he'll keep up that power play performance, as well as his overall fantasy dominance. So I'm completely all right with Kyle Connor. And if Gary didn't keep him, I sure as heck was going to draft him in the early rounds to get him on my squad. Looking ahead, Mikko Rantanen. This is an interesting one. I've seen a lot of split discussion on Rantanen on a lot of fantasy forums and podcasts alike. Rantanen did a bit of team hopping last year between Carolina, Colorado, Dallas. It was a big offseason conversation. I think when he joined Carolina, he didn't fit the system Carolina played, and when he moved to Dallas, it looked a bit more familiar to him, but it took until playoffs for him to really find his groove. And like I mentioned, if he can continue that groove into the new year and the rhythm he was playing is in the series against Colorado, I think he's going to be a dominant force and a very good fantasy player. I think Rantanen will be around the 80 point place in terms of scoring next year with Dallas. I don't think he puts up any ridiculous numbers, but I think he'll be a consistent player. One thing that comes to mind with Mikko Rantanen is he had a number of hat tricks in our league for some reason. I remember Gary was one of the only guys getting that scoring every week, and he would win weeks based off of Rantanen getting a hat trick, which was always funny. I think Kyle Connor also got a number of hat tricks too. But Mikko Rantanen, 82 games played last season, 412 fantasy points, 212 shots on net, and I believe 88 points, I want to say. But I'm not looking at the stats directly in front of me as I'm looking ahead to the last individual on Gary's team that he kept, and this was the only goalie kept out of any team, and that is the sensei that is Connor Hellebuyck. Now, Connor Hellebuyck is a keeper goalie for a reason. He had 551 fantasy points in 62 games started last year, 47 wins out of those 62 games, and a .925 save percentage and a 2 goals against average. And he got 8 shutouts last year, which you're getting shutouts in this league and wins and not letting in many goals week over week. You're a pretty good goalie. You're going to steal a lot of the weeks from guys who are working the wire to acquire goalies, or maybe have goalies that aren't getting the same production or save percentage as Hellebuyck. He can win you most weeks. So having him in your corner throughout the season, you know he's going to get a lot of the net, a lot of the creases throughout the season. You're constantly bringing in 12 to 15 points a night through Connor Hellebuyck. That's a pretty good task to have. I think Hellebuyck consistently had over 10 points for you in the back end of a daily deployment. So Connor Hellebuyck being a keeper, I'm completely comfortable with. I probably would have done the same. I know there's a lot of discussion around the zero goalie strategy. I know I did that last year, but having Hellebuyck is never a bad thing on your team. So I'm curious to see how goalies roll out heading into this season, especially with the 0G paying off last year. So that's everybody's keepers. Overall, looking at the teams, the biggest standouts, I would say, is every team has a defenseman besides Team Gary, but where Gary doesn't have the defenseman, he makes up with the best goalie in fantasy hockey in Connor Hellebuyck, and I would say 2 of the best forwards in Austin Matthews and Nikita Kucherov. Team Brown, diversified now, but he has Tkachuk with a question mark on seeing how that season starts. Team Colt, you look at that with a question mark of Werenski. Will he duplicate and replicate the season he had last year? Will he expand on that, or will he take a step back? And then you look at Team CFH, Kirill Kaprizov, massive question mark. Will he stay healthy throughout the year and play a full 82 games for once and be the dominance force that he is? So that is everybody's keepers heading into the new season, discussing a little bit on how they produced, why they kept them. Like I mentioned, we'll have another episode coming soon highlighting the top players going into the draft, my thoughts on who will go where, who will be the first overall draft pick in the 2025-2026 season. Appreciate everybody for your time today, and we'll see you all in the next episode.